It feels like society has become completely transactional in a way. What happened to socializing with people, wanting to know how their day is going, wanting to talk to people without some sort of ulterior motive? What happened to just being kind for the sake of being kind? It seems like that's being lost, and specifically in the West, it seems like that's being lost as everything becomes commoditized, monetized, and funneled into the system and economic system that we are currently set in. It's very interesting because I think this was also triggered by the big flu that happened 4 years ago, where it became more and more difficult for people to socialize in person. And so part of this is not necessarily the everyday person's fault. They didn't have control over how people reacted during that event. And in some places in the West, it was considered taboo and no good to be close to people and socialize with them. So I think this is a big thing that sort of triggered this behavior. But also in the West, it seems that unless something is commoditized, right? Because we live in a hyper consumeristic, capitalistic system, which I'm not saying that capitalism in itself is the bad or the problem. I'm just being realistic about the world we live in. But in this hyper consumeristic society where everything has a cost and commodity and label, it seems like people have sort of just in response carried that over into how they interact with people in general. There almost always has to be some sort of ulterior motive, or if they're interacting with someone and it's at a supermarket or a restaurant, it has to be just directed towards the service itself. There can't be any other conversation. There can't be any warmth towards the person. It's just get to the transactional thing that you're supposed to do for me so I can pay you the money. And that creates a really empty feeling society. It feels like, if we're just a bunch of beings that are meant to walk around and exchange, paper fake money, what's the point of life in general? I think that can create a serious amount of emptiness, a serious amount of, I would say, dysphoria with what is going on in society and why we even live life at all. Is that the purpose of life? Just to how many transactions and paper buck points we can accumulate? Because you're not gonna be able to take that with you when you die. Unfortunately, many people think maybe they can, but when you die, that stuff doesn't go with you onto the next life. And so I feel like a lot of people feel disoriented. They don't understand why things are this way, but things are becoming more and more this way, unfortunately. And especially in Western countries like America, where standards are completely breaking down. I've discussed that in other videos. People aren't taking anything seriously really at all. So they don't take themselves seriously. They don't dress nice. They don't take their job seriously. Some of it not their fault, but some of it does come down to personal responsibility. And it's because people aren't willing to take anything seriously. They're only really taking seriously the transaction that's occurring, the transaction of resources. It would make sense that would carry over into forms of social interactions. And this is not everywhere in the West. Some parts of the United States are much friendlier than others. There's different cultures and there's some wiggle room for that. I'm not saying everyone needs to be nicey, lovey-dovey to each other all the time. That's not the way to do it. I understand cultural differences. Where I'm from, it's definitely a more socially colder part of the United States, I would say. And to a degree, I'm okay with that because I've been to places like the South and people love to chat you up and love to talk and are very friendly, and I think that's great. But it's even sometimes a bit too much for me, judging from where I came from. So people in different cultures can express it in different ways. For example, I've been to Korea, and it's kind of known there that people aren't overly chatty and social, especially with strangers. But they are incredibly respectful with strangers. The bowing culture is still there. A lot of the sort of Confucius values are still ingrained into the culture, even in the 21st century. And so there is still an ingrained value of social respect, especially for elderly people in that country. So I understand that aspect of it, but it feels like as a whole, overall, if people are beginning to feel like that they're just being treated as economic beings, people who can just transfer wealth to each other, like I said, it makes sense that that would just carry over into everything in their lives, and even their social lives. And as things are moved digitally and online, and where it's almost okay to say that, oh, I have friends, but they're all online, which is interesting. I'd rather people have online friends than no friends at all. But it does seem like that's a little more of a colder way, or a little less of a personal way of knowing people than having friends in person, meeting people in person. And I will have a future video on the destruction of the third place, which I think has been very bad and very detrimental to society and has decimated social interactions. But what I would like to see in a way is people recognize, hey, not everything has to be this transactional thing. And like I said, I think the average person sees thousands of advertisements per day. So when people are getting ingrained daily, thousands of times, that they're just a money generator that is meant to be just thrown ads at, just have ads thrown at, just how much can we soak you of cash? How much can, the food product companies, can electronics companies, entertainment companies, your video games, just dead set with people who are experts in their field, who have mastered the ability to manipulate human emotions and get people to pull out their wallets, are constantly, thousands of times a day, just treating them as a walking wallet to pickpocket their money from. It's like people feel treated this way by society as a whole, that they're just a walking wallet. And so when they bump into each other, that mentality carries over, unfortunately. And so I don't know how to necessarily solve this problem as a whole, right? Solving a mass societal problem, right, is very difficult to do. But I would like to see an emphasis on people doing things in person together again, because I think the more time people spend together in person, the more familiar they become with their community and the warmer they get as a whole. And like I said, there's a spectrum of that where people can choose to be less warm or not, depending on their cultural environment. But overall, if we can find a way to return to just the level of social interaction before the big flu occurred, it may begin to resolve some of those things. But the second part of it is a more structural issue with how economies in the West, and particularly the United States, are set up, where people are treated as walking wallets. And I don't really feel like there's a lot of dignity in that. And like I said, this isn't a video intended to be like capitalism bad, other alternative good. That's not what this is. But I'm pointing out a very, I think, obvious issue with this system we have right now, which is treating people as simply economic beings, economic commodities, walking wallets, is not good for their self-esteem. It's not good for their self-image, because that carries over into other aspects of society, and it carries over into how they treat other things. And that becomes what people's sort of number one thing, that they feel like they're valued in that way, only economically. That's why specifically in the United States, it's very taboo to discuss people's salaries or money or ask people that, because the way our society is set up, your value is so intrinsically tied to how much money you're making, your economic value, because that's what's projected by pop culture. That's what's projected by the very, very powerful corporations that run these advertisements. And so people are going to feel very self-conscious about that, when really their value as people has nothing to do with their salary, or how much they make, or how much they're worth. It has nothing to do with that. But if you structure things that way, people will think that way, and that'll transition to making everything social, also transactional. And that's just a cold, empty existence that I don't think anyone wants to live like. Do people really want to live where they get up, they work a remote job that's just transactional? I do this, you pay me this. Let me DoorDash some food. Okay, you come to my door, I'll pay you this, I get this thing. Oh, video game, I need to pay for pleasure points so I can feel good when I buy my, whatever add-on for video games. I don't even know what the popular video games are anymore. It's like, is that an existence that makes sense? No, it's not. An existence is meant to be with other people, building towards something greater, not just a list of transactions you need to get through. So let me know in a comment what you think about this. Is there a solution for this? And do you think I'm onto something here? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. It's Thomas. And anyways, I will see you guys next time.